The night air was thick with the smell of rain and motor oil, the kind of atmosphere that clung to your clothes and reminded you where you came from. Streetlights flickered over the cracked pavement of Riverside District, casting long shadows that danced between the warehouses and auto shops that lined the industrial edge of the city. For Marcus Bennett, this neighborhood was home, a place where dreams were whispered quietly and worked for desperately. Tonight, he was walking with purpose, his worn leather portfolio tucked under his arm, containing certifications he'd earned through night classes and a resume that represented 3 years of relentless self-improvement. He was heading to Titan Security Solutions, a private firm that contracted with half the city's businesses. They'd finally called him back after months of applications, offering him an interview slot at 9 p.m., the only opening they had before filling the position. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was legitimate, stable, and it paid enough to help his mother with her medical bills and maybe, just maybe, let him think about his own future for once. Marcus had ironed his only black dress shirt twice, polished his shoes until they looked almost new, and practiced his answers until they felt natural. Everything was riding on this. The motorcycle club's headquarters sat 3 blocks from the security firm, a low brick building with bikes lined up outside like metallic sentries. Marcus knew enough to walk on the other side of the street when he passed it. The Hells Angels weren't the largest club in the city, but they commanded respect and kept a tight grip on this part of town. Most people avoided trouble by simply staying out of their way. But as Marcus approached the corner of Industrial and 5th, something made him slow his pace. A young woman was stumbling along the sidewalk near the club's building, her movements erratic and unsteady. She wore a black leather jacket that seemed too heavy for her frame, and her dark hair hung in tangles around her face. Even from a distance, Marcus could tell something was very wrong. She lurched forward, catching herself against a chain-link fence, then took a few more steps before her knees buckled entirely. Marcus glanced at his phone, 8:47 p.m. He had 13 minutes to make it to his interview, and it was still 2 blocks away. Around him, a few cars passed without slowing. A couple walking their dog crossed to the other side of the street, pointedly looking away. The unspoken rule of the neighborhood: mind your business, especially near the clubhouse. But the girl collapsed completely now, crumpling onto the concrete near a streetlight, her body curling in on itself. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Every practical instinct told him to keep walking, to prioritize the interview that could change his life. But his feet had already stopped moving. If you believe in the power of observation, in trusting your instincts, and in the courage it takes to speak up when something feels wrong, then pause for a moment. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to Black Iron Tales. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, because this story will remind you that heroes come in all sizes, and sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. Marcus crossed the street with quick, determined steps. As he knelt beside her, he could see her face was flushed, her breathing rapid and shallow. Her eyes were half open but unfocused, and when he gently touched her shoulder, she barely responded. "Hey, can you hear me?" Marcus kept his voice calm but firm. "What's your name?" She mumbled something incoherent, her hand weakly clutching at her jacket. That's when Marcus noticed the medical alert bracelet on her wrist. He carefully turned it to read the engraving: Type 1 diabetes, severe hypoglycemia risk. His mind raced through the first aid training he'd taken last year. Low blood sugar. She needed glucose, and she needed it fast. He checked her jacket pockets and found a small case containing glucose tablets. Relief flooded through him as he broke one open. "I need you to try to swallow this," he said, supporting her head gently. "It's going to help." Getting her to take the tablet took patience and several attempts, but finally she managed to swallow it. Marcus checked his phone again. 8:54 p.m. His interview was starting in 6 minutes, and he was still 2 blocks away with a semi-conscious girl who couldn't be left alone. He heard footsteps approaching and tensed. 3 men in leather vests emerged from the shadows near the clubhouse, their expressions hard and suspicious. The patches on their vests marked them clearly. Hell's Angels. "The hell you doing with her?" The largest of the 3, a bearded man with arms covered in tattoos, stepped forward with unmistakable menace in his voice. Marcus raised his hand slightly, staying calm. She collapsed. She's diabetic and her blood sugar dropped. I just gave her glucose. She's going to need more help, though. The men exchanged glances. The bearded one pulled out a phone, making a quick call while the other two crouched near the girl. One of them, a leaner man with a scarred face, looked at Marcus with less hostility now. You know what you're doing? Basic first aid, but she needs proper medical attention. I was about to call 911. Already done, the bearded man said, pocketing his phone. He studied Marcus with sharp, evaluating eyes. You just happened to be walking by? I was heading to a job interview. I saw her fall. Marcus met his gaze steadily, knowing that any sign of nervousness could be misinterpreted as guilt. The girl stirred slightly, her breathing becoming more regular. The scarred man checked her pulse, his movements surprisingly gentle. She's stabilizing. Emma, can you hear me? It's Reaper. Her eyes fluttered open, still cloudy but more present. I forgot my insulin, she whispered. Marcus checked his phone one last time. 9:02 p.m. His interview had started 2 minutes ago. The weight of what he was losing settled over him like a physical thing, pressing down on his chest. He'd prepared for months. This was his chance. But looking at the girl whose color was slowly returning, whose breathing was evening out, he knew there had been no other choice. The ambulance arrived within minutes, its lights painting the street in alternating red and white. The paramedics took over efficiently, checking Emma's vitals and preparing to transport her. As they loaded her onto the stretcher, she looked at Marcus with clearer eyes now. You helped me, she said, her voice stronger. Thank you, Marcus nodded, managed a small smile. Take care of yourself. The bearded man approached him as the ambulance doors closed. What's your name? Marcus Bennett. That interview you mentioned, where was it? Titan Security, but it's over now. They only had one slot. The man studied him for a long moment, then extended a hand. Name's Hammer, president of this chapter. Emma's my daughter. He let that information hang in the air. You could have kept walking. Yeah, I could have. Marcus shook his hand firmly. But I didn't. Hammer nodded slowly, something like respect flickering across his weathered face. Get home safe, Marcus Bennett. Marcus walked away from his missed opportunity, his portfolio feeling heavier with every step. He didn't head toward Titan Security. There was no point now. Instead, he turned toward home, toward explanations he'd have to give his mother, toward the reality that kindness had cost him his best chance in years. The next week dragged by in a familiar rhythm of disappointment. Marcus returned to his part-time work at a warehouse, loading trucks before dawn and unloading them after sunset. He helped his mother with her physical therapy exercises, kept the apartment clean, and sent out more job applications that mostly went unanswered. Titan Security had sent a brief impersonal email confirming they'd filled the position. No amount of explaining would have mattered anyway. He didn't tell anyone what had happened that night. What was there to say? That he'd sacrificed his future for a stranger? That he'd done the right thing and gotten nothing for it except the knowledge that a girl was safe? It sounded noble in theory, but bills didn't care about nobility, and his mother's medications didn't pay for themselves. On Thursday morning, Marcus was finishing his warehouse shift when his phone rang. The number was local, but unfamiliar. Is this Marcus Bennett? A woman's voice, professional and direct. Yes, this is Marcus. My name is Victoria Cross. I'm calling on behalf of a client who would like to meet with you today. Are you available at 2 p.m.? Marcus frowned, suspicion creeping in. Meet about what? A business opportunity. I've been asked not to provide details over the phone, but I can assure you this is legitimate. The address is 847 Industrial Boulevard. Should I confirm your attendance? The address was in the same neighborhood as the clubhouse. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Who's your client? You'll understand when you arrive. Will 2 p.m. work for you, Mr. Bennett? Against his better judgment, curiosity won out. Yeah, I'll be there. At 1:55 p.m., Marcus stood outside a nondescript office building that he'd passed 100 times without noticing. The small brass plate beside the door read, Hell's Angels Enterprises, Legitimate Business Division. His heart sank. This couldn't be good. But he'd come this far, and walking away now felt worse than seeing it through. He pressed the buzzer. The interior was surprisingly professional. Modern furniture, clean floors, framed photographs of motorcycles and group rides on the walls. Victoria Cross turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who greeted him with a firm handshake and led him down a hallway to a corner office. Behind the desk sat Hammer, looking somehow more imposing in casual business attire than he had in his leather vest. Standing beside him was Emma, healthier now, her hair pulled back, wearing jeans and a simple sweater. She smiled when she saw Marcus, a genuine expression of recognition and gratitude. "Mr. Bennett, thank you for coming." Hammer gestured to a chair. "Please, sit down." Marcus sat, keeping his expression neutral despite the confusion churning inside him. "I'm not sure why I'm here." "You're here because my daughter insisted." Hammer leaned back in his chair. "Emma told me what happened that night, how you stopped when everyone else walked by, how you knew exactly what to do, how you stayed with her until help arrived." He paused. "She also told me about your interview." Emma stepped forward. "I asked my dad to find you. I wanted to thank you properly, but also I wanted to explain." She glanced at her father, then back at Marcus. "I have type 1 diabetes. I've managed it since I was 12. But that night I'd been stressed, hadn't eaten properly, and I made a mistake with my insulin. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late to get help." Her voice softened. "If you hadn't stopped, I might have fallen into a coma. You saved my life, Marcus." Marcus felt the weight of her words, but tried to keep his response measured. "I'm glad you're okay, but I still don't understand why I'm here." Hammer opened a folder on his desk. Hell's Angels Enterprises runs several legitimate businesses: auto shops, a construction company, property management, and a security consulting firm. We contract with businesses that prefer working with people they trust, people who understand loyalty and know how to handle themselves. He slid a document across the desk. "We're offering you a position as a security coordinator. It pays more than what Titan was offering, includes full benefits and training, and there's room for advancement." Marcus stared at the paper, the salary figure making his breath catch. It was almost double what he'd hoped to make at Titan. "Why?" "Because character matters," Hammer said simply. "Anyone can interview well. Anyone can talk about integrity. But you proved yours when it cost you something. That's rare." He leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to join the club. This is a straight business offer. You'd be working in security consultation, helping our clients protect their assets, training their teams, legitimate work, legitimate pay. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Black Iron Tales. We bring you stories that prove heroism comes in all forms, that courage isn't measured by size or age, and that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. Tell us in the comments, have you ever noticed something important that others missed? Your story might inspire someone else. Marcus looked from the document to Emma's hopeful face to Hammer's steady gaze. Every practical part of him screamed that this was too good to be true, that there had to be a catch. But another part of him, the part that had made him stop that night, recognized something genuine in their offer. "I need to be clear about something," Marcus said carefully. "I'm not interested in anything illegal. I'm trying to build a legitimate life." "So are we," Hammer replied. "That's exactly why we want people like you. This division exists because we're building something that lasts, something beyond the club. We need people with integrity, not people looking for shortcuts." Marcus read through the contract carefully. The terms were clear, the responsibilities outlined specifically, the benefits better than anything he'd ever been offered. It was real. The opportunity he'd lost had somehow transformed into something better. "There's one condition," Hammer added. "Emma wants to work with you on a community health initiative, teaching first aid in neighborhoods like this one, where people might not call 911 because they don't trust authority. She wants to make sure what happened to her doesn't happen to someone else." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "We could save lives, Marcus. People like you, who know what to do and aren't afraid to act, that's what communities need." Marcus felt something shifting inside him, a sense that this moment was bigger than just a job offer. This was about the kind of person he wanted to be, the kind of life he wanted to build, not just for himself, but for his neighborhood, his mother, maybe even for others he didn't know yet. He picked up the pen Victoria had placed beside the contract. "When do I start?" The smile that broke across Emma's face was radiant. Hammer extended his hand again, and this time the handshake felt like a covenant, not just an agreement. As Marcus left the office an hour later, contract signed and start date confirmed, he walked through the same streets that had witnessed his sacrifice, but they looked different now, full of possibility instead of limitation. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother asking how the warehouse shift went. He smiled, typing back, "Actually, Ma, I got a new job, a good one. I'll tell you everything tonight." The sun was setting over the industrial district, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Marcus paused at the corner where he'd made his choice, where he'd stopped when others walked by, where he'd put someone else's life before his own ambition. Sometimes, he thought, the universe doesn't test us with grand dramatic moments. Sometimes it tests us with split-second decisions on ordinary street corners when no one's watching and the cost feels impossibly high. And sometimes when we pass those tests, when we choose compassion over convenience, we don't just save someone else, we save ourselves too. Marcus continued walking, his steps lighter now, carrying not just a contract but proof that doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted, can lead you towards something you never knew you needed. The closed door behind him had led to one far better, opened not by ambition or credentials, but by the simple, powerful choice to see someone suffering and refuse to look away. Thank you for reading. If this story reminded you to trust your instincts, to speak up when something feels wrong, and to never underestimate the power of paying attention, please share it. Subscribe to Black Iron Tales for more stories that prove heroes are everywhere. Courage comes in all forms, and sometimes the smallest person in the room has the biggest impact. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Marcus's place?